Hi, welcome to Bastards of History, where we discuss some of the lesser known bad guys of history while in a bar. We explore each of these dubious and ethically challenged characters in 20 minutes or less, and of course, at the end, I'll give you our ranking for each historical figure on the scale of bastardness. Today's Bastard of History is Grigori Rasputin, a perfect candidate to start our series. So, let's make a drink and get started. Grigori Rasputin was born in 1869 in a small village called Pokrovskoye in Siberia in Russia. And by the way, not to be rude out of the gate, but even by pre-Soviet Siberian standards, his appearance gives off some major sketchy vibes. As of 2010, the area where his village was located had a whopping 23,000 people living across 2,600 square miles. So let's see, that's an average of less than 1,000 people per square mile. So it's safe to say that he grew up in a remote part of an already very remote part of Russia. He was the son of a farmer, and like the rest of his family, he probably was not formally educated in childhood and did not learn to read or write until adulthood. Not much is known about his childhood with certainty, though there is some speculation that his youth was marked by drunkenness, which, by Russian standards, is pretty typical, I guess, as well as petty theft and a general disrespect for authority. In 1886, at the age of 17, he went to Abalak, where there were somehow even fewer people than his own village, and he met a girl named Praskovia Dubrovina. They dated for a few months and then got married in February 1887. Talk about a short engagement! Rasputin's wife, Praskovia, would largely remain in his hometown of Pokrovskoye and was devoted to him the rest of his life, despite all of the increasingly questionable behaviors Rasputin would exhibit. So, for those of you on your phones in the back, the early life of Grigori Rasputin. Born in a remote village in 1869 in Siberia. Cold, Russia. Drunken mischief and distaste for authority, got married at the age of 18 to a girl of the same peasant class. So, how did Grigori Rasputin end up becoming one of our devious little bastards of history? Well, we're about to find out. In 1897, so 10 years into his marriage and around the age of 28, our man Rasputin had a so-called religious awakening. I know, what could possibly go wrong here? Rasputin left his village and went on a pilgrimage. The reasons for his departure ranged from a legit spiritual awakening to the possibility that he was fleeing to avoid punishment for horse theft. In either case, this was a turning point for our man. His visit to the St. Nicholas Monastery at Verkhoturye, a small village of less than 10,000 people, as of 2010, in the Ural Mountains, changed Rasputin into an intensely religious man. Despite this religious conversion, Rasputin curiously found monastic life not to his liking. So of course, he didn't just become a typical monk. No, our man Rasputin found other ways of expressing his religious zeal. He spent the next few years as a wanderer, going all over the country to visit holy sites, and by the early 1900s, Rasputin had developed a small following among the peasant class, who would pray with him. This ragtag version of Sunday school even built a secret chapel in the cellar of Rasputin's father's home, where Rasputin was curiously still living. Free rent is a tough thing to pass on, even in your 30s. Am I right, millennials? Rasputin and his gang would have secret prayer meetings, which drew the ire and scorn of the local clergy and even other villagers. Why would secret prayer meetings draw suspicion from the other villagers? Oh, maybe because there were rumors that Rasputin was being ceremoniously washed by his female followers? Not only that, Rasputin began to preach a very peculiar theology that goes along these lines. In order to avoid sin, one must first embrace it. This is sort of like saying, in order to not cheat on your wife, you must first cheat on your wife a bunch of times. And guess what? He did cheat on his wife, like all the time. There was even a rumor that he would officiate weddings under the specific condition that he got to sleep with the bride on the wedding night. I mean, talk about a guy who could sell ice to Eskimos. This guy's charisma is off the charts. So much so that Rasputin's charm and persuasiveness began to spread throughout Siberia, and he developed a real cult of personality. He traveled to Kazan, which is an actual city with lots of people, as opposed to the small little villages he had previously operated in. And apparently the urban sprawl did nothing to stop him. Rasputin simply scaled up his habits and began fucking even more women who were drawn to him for religious reasons. Despite this, some of the church leadership also became enamored with this total fucking sex addict, and they gave him a letter of recommendation so that he could take his little nymphomaniac blend of spirituality to St. Petersburg, an even bigger place, and thus an even greater opportunity for this guy to go balls deep into whatever damsel crosses his path. While in St. Petersburg, he impressed the church leadership so much that one of them let him stay for free in his house. And in this role, he was invited to all kinds of wealthy gatherings where aristocrats would get together. And so, our man Rasputin had set himself up for a very cushy life. So, let's regroup for a sec. Rasputin is born a peasant boy in the middle of nowhere Russia, gets married at a young age, then perhaps for non-genuine or genuine reasons, decides to go become a holy man. But rather than be a calm monk or something, he decides that by embracing sin, we can avoid it. Which again, makes no fucking sense. He starts banging his female followers and even other dudes' brides on account of his ridiculous charisma and charm. It's certainly not his good looks or money that are doing any of this. He then goes to a big city where he repeats his practice, and then they send him to an even bigger city where his unbelievable charm gets him not only free rent and board at a church leader's house in St. Petersburg, he's even getting to ham it up with some of the wealthiest people in Russia. So, at one level, you gotta admire this guy. I mean, talk about upward mobility in a society that was brutally oppressive. He's not just self-made, he's an effing astronaut compared to literally everyone else in his village. So you would think, why fuck with a good thing? He's got it made. He's just gonna kick back in his free housing, fuck attractive females, and schmooze with Russia's elites, right? No, he's not done yet. He's going to keep going. In 1905, Rasputin became introduced to the Tsar and Tsarina of Russia. That's right, the literally two most powerful people in the entire country of Russia. The people who rule a country that has like 85 time zones and enough vodka to fill the ocean. And guess what? They fucking loved him. Immediately, and without any doubt. Just like every motherfucker who came across his path. This guy could quite seriously win an award for most persuasive dude who ever lived. Not only did they become friends, but Tsar Nicholas and Tsarina Alexandra became convinced that Rasputin had healing powers that could aid their son. This is because the Tsarevich, Alexei, suffered from hemophilia, which is a condition that makes someone bruise easily, some internal bleeding, and can cause even prolonged bleeding from cuts. It was a pretty big deal back in that age, but especially so when the presumed heir to the throne and future leader of Russia happens to suffer from it. So, by 1906, our Super Saiyan of a social climber climbs to the top of the ladder. He becomes the official healer of the Tsarevich Alexei. That's right, folks. Grigori Rasputin became one of the most influential people. We're talking top 10, maybe even top 5 in the entire country, and perhaps by extension, top 100 in all of Europe. He didn't do it with money. He didn't do it with an army. He didn't do it by staging a coup. He didn't do it by selling his country out to a foreign power. And he certainly didn't do it with his good looks. He did it by becoming a whacked out spiritual leader, plowing lots of bitches, and then just charming the fuck out of literally every single person he ever met. At this point, I want to say that despite my background in politics, I am not an overly cynical person. I am open to the idea that healers could have existed or even still do. But this guy? Let's just say I'm highly skeptical of his self-proclaimed healing abilities. Nevertheless, it is important to note that he was successful on numerous occasions in improving the Tsarevich Alexei's conditions whenever he was afflicted by his hemophilia. Seriously, the guy got results. That's a big part of the reason he got to stick around so long. In fact, 6 years into his position as official healer of the Tsarevich, Alexei hurt himself and was in very dire straits, verging on death. In her desperation, the Tsarina sent a telegram to Rasputin asking him to pray for Alexei. Rasputin wrote back quickly, saying, "God has seen your tears and heard your prayers. Do not grieve. The little one will not die. Do not allow the doctors to bother him too much." Within 2 days, Alexei stopped bleeding and his condition improved, and he made a full recovery. Even the doctors at the time called the Tsarevich's recovery miraculous. Medical experts concede that Tsarina Alexandra could not be blamed for thinking Rasputin's mystical healing abilities had saved her son. At my university, I saw a friend of mine present her thesis on Grigori Rasputin, and this topic of his supposed healing abilities came up, naturally. And the general consensus among the history professors is that his remarkable track record with healing Alexei was a case of association, not causation. He was not healing the Tsarevich directly on account of his mystical powers. No. His presence calmed the boy's mother down, which in turn calmed the boy down and allowed his body to heal naturally. Calm the Tsarina, calm the Tsarevich. So, in a way, Rasputin isn't exactly an entire fraud in this regard. He actually was very effective at healing the Tsarevich, which was literally his job. Rasputin's prolific sexual appetite, close relationship with the Tsarina, and constant presence with the imperial children led to unsavory rumors spreading in the public, including graphic cartoons that circulated depicting Rasputin and the Tsarina having relations. Nevertheless, his influence persisted. Tsar Nicholas even made him his so-called lamplighter, tasked with lighting lamps in front of religious icons in the palace. So, instead of having a bored adolescent altar boy lighting candles like in the Vatican, the Russian royalty had a wild bearded man who was a highly persuasive sex addict serving in this role. And this meant his constant presence in the palace, which began to get out to the general public. Like all good religious men, Rasputin became corrupt, accepting bribes and favors. In normal times, this wouldn't be a major problem and would constitute standard operating procedure in an autocratic government, but Russia was about to find herself in what many might call suboptimal times. Bad guys in history usually have a downfall, and this brings us to the turning point for our boy Rasputin. He overstayed his welcome, overplayed his hand, did not know when to quit while he was ahead, and he became a polarizing figure in Russia. Local clergy in his hometown even declared him a heretic, which is a pretty cool stab in the back from his homeboys back east. Nevertheless, Rasputin kept going. He preached that intimate contact between him and others purified them. Curiously, these others were all of the female orientation and never of the male variety. Like most priests, Rasputin got into drunken brawls and had affairs with prostitutes and even high society ladies. That's right, he was fucking the wives of some of the wealthiest, most powerful men in Russia at the time. The guy had balls. You gotta give him that. The onset of World War I and Russia's poor performance led to widespread unrest. More and more people began to blame Rasputin's influence on the royal family, and as a result, Rasputin was the subject of not one, but two assassination attempts. You know you're killing it in life when not one, but two attempts are made on your life. In the first attempt, Rasputin was stabbed in the stomach by a peasant woman, who reportedly screamed, "I have killed the Antichrist," which may not have been such a hyperbolic statement in hindsight, but he survived. The second attempt did not fail, though the son of a bitch put up one hell of a fight. The story goes that a group of nobles devised a plot to kill Rasputin, but these so-called assassins were like the ultimate slapdicks of assassins. Grade A assassin school dropouts. They decided to use poison, but didn't understand how poison would really work. They had guns, but didn't know how to properly handle them. The assassination really embodied the incompetence of the Russian aristocracy. They invited him to Prince Yusupov's palace shortly after midnight and led Rasputin down to the basement. They gave him poisoned food, which he ate, but the poison didn't work. Rasputin asked for wine, which the conspirators gladly gave him with poison in it, and he drank not one, not two, but 3 whole glasses of poisoned wine. And our man Rasputin did not die. The poison did not work. He was roaring drunk and utterly unpoisoned. So, one of them went upstairs and returned with a pistol, told Rasputin to say a prayer, and then shot him in the chest. Case closed, right? Nope. Our boy Rasputin is a fighter, and he got back up, and he did not run away. He attacked his assassins with his bare fucking hands. The assassins shot him again, and then retrieved clubs and started just beating the shit out of him until he stopped moving. They wrapped the presumably dead corpse of Rasputin in blankets, and shortly before they threw him into the freezing river, they saw his body moving again. The guy just refuses to quit. In this story, Rasputin died of hypothermia or drowning, and a photo of his deceased body can be found on the internet. More recently, others have argued that Rasputin was killed by 3 bullets, a fatal one entering his head. But where's the fun in that? Rasputin's death was followed shortly after by the downfall of the Russian Empire and the rise of the Bolshevik Revolution, and the eventual murder of Tsar Nicholas, Tsarina Alexandra, and each of their children. Rasputin's legacy is not so much one of cause or effect, but rather symmetry. As wild and crazy as his personal story is, it is a strikingly fitting metaphor for the collapse of the Tsardom of Russia. That this total maniac from bumfuck Siberia could fuck and charm his way into the imperial palace and become one of the country's most influential men is a striking indictment on how terrible the system of government was operating. And the Russian people understandably became convinced that the only way out of this oppressive and dysfunctional regime was by violently murdering the people in charge, and then replacing them with an equally dysfunctional and repressive regime, the Soviet Union. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. And so, Rasputin's fantastical story simply mirrors the excesses and bewildering logic of a dying form of government that ended, like Rasputin, in violent tragedy. As promised, here is Grigori Rasputin's ranking on the scale of bastardness. On a scale of self-interested shyster to psychopathic mass murderer, self-proclaimed Christian mystic Grigori Rasputin comes in low on the scale, in between self-interested shyster and callous charlatan. Why the relatively generous ranking? Well, he didn't kill anybody, that we are aware of at least. I mean, when we refer to the body count of a guy on Bastards of History, we normally mean the number of people the guy killed or ordered to be killed. But in Rasputin's case, body count just means number of chicks he banged. And for him, that has to be in the 4 figures at a minimum. For him to come out of that in his era with minimal STDs requires some sort of divine intervention. But nevertheless, the guy was clearly corrupt, extremely self-interested, abused his absurd charisma to his own personal, carnal, and commercial gain. And had he not been stopped, albeit by the most ham-handed assassination ever carried out, who knows what he might have abused his privilege for? Not only is he possibly the most persuasive man who ever lived, he's also the winner of least faithful husband on account of his stratospheric infidelity, all the while posing as a family man with his wife and kids. And speaking of kids, Rasputin's daughter Maria moved to France after the Bolshevik Revolution and then lived in the United States. Her profession? A dancer, and even a lion tamer in a circus. Sounds just like her father's daughter. And finally, I must note that Rasputin is the obvious inspiration for Boney M's song Rasputin. And let me tell you, it hits differently when you hear it for the first time while traveling through Poland in your Ukrainian Uber driver's car. Don't agree with my ranking? Go to the comments and tell me why I'm wrong. And while you're there, hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps us keep making these. Want us to cover a specific bastard of history? Let us know in the comments section. Until next time, keep calm, drink on, and don't be a bastard like Rasputin.